Hello and welcome to a special edition of the podcast of the Prison Officers Association, the UK's largest professional union for prison, correctional and secure psychiatric workers with over 30,000 members. In this episode, we look at the POA's involvement in the immigration sector, including the latest developments at the immigration facility in Munston, Kent. I started off by asking Assistant General Secretary Andy Baxter for a little information about the extent and the history of the POA's involvement in this sector.
The POA have been involved in the immigration sector since 1999-2000. We first gained recognition with a company named Wackenhut. In those days, immigration services were split into two distinct entities, immigration centres and immigration escorting. The POA gained recognition on the escorting side of the operation. The POA have worked with around 6 previous private companies prior to Mighty Care and Custody taking over the contract. On the contract, we currently represent over 400 members working across the whole of the UK, including staff working in the juxtaposed bases at Calais, Cockheels and Dunkirk.
So how is member recruitment going across the contract?
Very well. Memberships increased from around 180 to over 400. That increase is across the UK and down to a large successful recruitment campaign by Mighty Care and Custody, which has seen a significant expansion at the Munston airfield site in Kent.
I'm sure we'll discuss Munston in more depth in a moment. Where else might we find POA members working on the immigration contract, and what exactly are their roles?
POA members provide care and custodial services to asylum seekers that are legally detained by the government. We have members in all major international airports and ferry terminals in the UK. They operate short-term holding facilities where people are held to allow border agency and UK immigration services to process individuals and complete the checks required that decide if someone is returned to their own country, held in an immigration removal centre, or suitable to be bailed into the community, awaiting decisions on their asylum applications. Our members also provide support in some of the reporting centres where those bailed must report on a regular basis.
Now, you mentioned the juxtaposed bases in France. How does that work?
Well, essentially, these are 3 bases in France, the Calais port, Coquilles and Dunkirk. They're essentially UK bases on French soil. Our members assist the border agency and UK immigration to identify and return people that they discover trying to make the illegal trip to the UK. Our members process them, hold them and hand them back to the French authorities.
So to be clear, and I think this is an area where there could be some confusion, to be clear, we're not talking about the people attempting to cross the channel in small boats.
Our members are not involved trying to disrupt that activity. Our members hold the people who try to make a crossing on a ferry with invalid documents. They hold those that are discovered stored away in lorries and other vehicles, or people that try to use the Channel Tunnel to gain illegal entry into the UK.
I understand. But have the boat crossings had an impact on the numbers trying to make the journey in lorries or through the channel?
We believe so. Our members on the juxtaposed bases did notice a change of operation by those attempting to gain access to the UK by the more traditional method. However, it did coincide with significant improvements in security features and fencing around the ports and the Channel Tunnel areas.
Now, I've noticed increased publicity being raised by the POA in relation to the Munston site, and I'm aware that the POA recently visited to support members at that site. And what did you find when you went there?
We found a site that had originally been mobilised to take the pressure off improvised facilities at the port of Dover, Tughaven. Munston was originally anticipated to hold around 1,000 people. However, its core function was to be a transitory site with people expected to stay 24 to 48 hours for assessment before either being transferred to an immigration removal centre or bailed awaiting the outcome of their asylum application.
Right, and we can see from the media and POA press releases that things have not gone to plan at all at Munston. What do you think has gone so wrong?
The initial plans were sound. The objective was to provide better facilities compared to the Tughaven operation. The mobilisation by the Home Office, border agencies and contractors was impressive, and the initial offering was a huge improvement over the double-decker buses and Army Field Hospital being utilised to its limits in Tughaven. As the number of small boat crossings continued to rise, the combination of full immigration removal centres and the reduced use of hotel space to accommodate migrants and their families meant the government were left with a tough decision. And our POA members find themselves at the forefront of that developing crisis.
I mean, that's quite strong language, a developing crisis. Is it really that serious?
Yeah, it is. There isn't a solution in sight. We've been on site recently. We spent 2 days, and the best way to describe it, and it sounds alarmist, but I'm sure it's not. It's a humanitarian crisis on British soil. All our staff are working flat out, our members. The original short-term holding facility that's staffed by the POA members originally consisted of 4 marquees designed to hold 150 residents per marquee, with some additional space for families and children. On our visit, the site had expanded to 22 marquees and some additional former military accommodation. Munston is now the largest single site of detention in the UK, holding over 3,000 people. There is no prison in the UK that accommodates that many people. The areas being operated by our members are being stretched to the limits, frustrations are mounting, and the POA members on site are working flat out to keep the peace in their section of the operation. However, tensions are starting to mount in other sections of the site.
So I read an account of a POA member recently that described the facility as a pressure cooker without a release valve. Is that still the case?
Very much so. All agencies and contractors on the site are dealing with some very volatile situations. However, tensions on the part of the site not staffed by our members are noticeably higher. The pressure release valve always was that ability to move people on in a timely manner. So yeah, that remains a good description of the situation.
And how are these tensions assessed?
Coming from a prison background, in prisons there are several factors that feed into a bigger picture around stability relating to an establishment. One of those key indicators of an establishment's stability are the number of use of force interventions that take place. In the expanded accommodation at Munston, there was recently a 24-hour period where 17 use of force interventions took place.
So 17 in 24 hours sounds high. What would you normally expect the rate to be? What level would raise concerns?
That's quite a difficult question to answer. It would depend on an establishment's stability. The alarm bells for us would start ringing if an area was having over half a dozen, 6 use of force interventions in the 24-hour period.
It sounds like things are really, really, really difficult for POA members. But what are the conditions like for people seeking asylum?
They're not good. It's a site of 2 halves. The original site is struggling due to the pressure of numbers. However, facilities on that part of the site do seem to be better. It was mobilised with time to put decent facilities in place. The expanded site's a different picture. The marquees have been erected very quickly in response to the ever increasing numbers of boats coming over the channel. They have plywood floors. The residents are sleeping on the floor. They use pieces of cardboard on the floor, or they place a blanket on the floor and a blanket over them. Can you imagine a UK prison with 3,000 people on site with no beds? There are some roll-out mattresses in the original part of the camp, and some rubber play mats are being utilised for beds. But in 18 of the marquees, it's very grim indeed.
So who has overall control of the site?
That's a burning issue for us. The simple answer at present seems to be no one. There are numerous agencies, departments within departments, wheels within wheels, contractors and military personnel on site. The POA have got lots of experience and we're used to working with prisons, and in some ways prisons are similar. You may have private caterers on site, you may have training and education providers on site, civil servant instructors, private healthcare. They all provide a very valued contribution to the prison, but you know that the governor is in charge. The buck stops with him. He's the authority, he's the decision maker. That appears to be missing at Munston, and it's sorely needed.
If there was that figure imposed, how would that improve things?
At present, the organisations have control of their own area, but little authority when dealing interagency. And instead of agencies operating efficiently, you get conflict and doubts about spans of control. For example, if you had a prison with 3,000 people in it that doesn't have a central communication network, doesn't have a central control room, doesn't have an incident response system, you are heading for trouble. All that needs to be put in place. My opinion is the site should be under the control of someone with a detention or a prison background.
What are the most immediate concerns then?
Staff welfare. The Home Office went on record to admit there have been suspected cases of diphtheria, a condition that we thought was eradicated for the UK. There's been a suspected norovirus outbreak. Scabies has been reported, and the most recent unconfirmed concern coming out of the site, people are telling us that foot and mouth disease has made an appearance. The other thing that is of huge concern is the opportunity for detainees to overpower staff. Concerted indiscipline will occur if people keep getting brought to that facility with no prospect of being moved on.
Andy, you mentioned a military presence on site. What's their purpose?
The military are providing at present purely a logistical support on site. They've been getting involved with some of the erection of facilities and helping the MOJ with some of the construction aspects, some of the logistics of getting water and waste reciprocal tanks and things on site and moved around. However, I wouldn't be surprised at present if the military are part of contingency plans if large-scale unrest takes place in the facility.
I mean, this sounds truly desperate. But what can be done to improve the situation?
I think the government have been asleep on duty, preoccupied with their own internal issues. Was I surprised by the recent resignation of the Home Secretary? Not at all. If I'd inherited this absolute shamble of a migration system, I would have resigned. We need that overall leader on site, someone who has government direction and support for a plan for the winter. We believe that this time next month there'll be over 5,000 people being held in this facility. At present, with the best will in the world, staff on site and managers are firefighting on an hour-by-hour basis. They've no opportunity to plan. Are we really saying that 5,000 people will be housed in tents through a British winter? Medical screening and improvements in care for residents will reduce risks to our members and other people working on the site. We only found out recently that a GP will be on site 24/7 from the 1st of November. It beggars belief that you have a facility as large as this with an unknown population, with unknown medical conditions, and there's no GP on site. Long term, government need a plan. The majority of people on site are being held without warrant. They're simply detained for making the illegal crossing. There are huge potential legal implications for the government and the British taxpayer. The response from the government so far has simply been to cross the fingers, hope for inclement weather, rough seas, and hope that reduces the number of crossings. That's not a plan we need, and our members on site need decisions and leadership from this government. Some people may think the solution's quite simple, to bail people, but that's not without significant risk. Current intelligence is that Albanian organised crime gangs are using the small boat crossings to infiltrate criminal operators into the UK. The solution could be to build a purpose-built immigration removal centre on site and hold people in safe, decent conditions while their fate's decided.
For more information on the union's work in looking after the interests of POA members irrespective of where they work, and also to find out how to join the union if you're not yet a member, visit poauk.org.uk. I hope you will join us for the next edition of the POA podcast. Thanks for listening, and goodbye.